I want to be 100% clear. Now, not later, not sometime in the future, now, we need to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act.
Yes.
It needs to be signed into law, and we also need to pass H.R. 1. Our citizens can't wait any longer. And I want to echo what our majority whip here in the U.S. House, Jim Clyburn, talked about when he mentioned a carve-out for H.R. 4, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act.
We really want to drill down on the importance of the Democratic leader Clyburn's comments about a carve-out on the filibuster with respect to voting rights. If you can have a carve-out for a right-wing Supreme Court justice, why can't you have a carve-out to protect the very fundamentals of our democracy?
Democrats from the Texas state legislature dramatically left the state of Texas yesterday to block Republicans from passing another draconian anti-voting rights bill in that state. More than 50 Democratic Texas legislators are now in Washington and planning to be there for weeks out of the reach of Texas law enforcement. As long as they stay away, the legislature back home in Texas can't pass anything because there aren't enough legislators there to have a quorum. In the midst of that difficult standoff, Texas Democrats from the state legislature spoke today at the U.S. Capitol alongside members of Congress from Texas. They're basically begging for federal help, urging Democrats in Congress to carve out, to amend the rules of the United States Senate so the Senate can pass voting rights legislation with just the Democratic majority. The Texas state representative you saw speaking there about changing the rules for a right-wing Supreme Court justice, that's true. The filibuster isn't something that's, existed since the Constitution. It's a relatively recent invention, and it has changed a lot, including in recent years, as there have been carve-outs from the filibuster rule for all sorts of things, including judicial nominees, Supreme Court justices, cabinet nominees. There's all sorts of things the filibuster used to apply to that it doesn't anymore. Why not voting rights? It's within Democrats' power to make that change. Now, you heard them name-checking South Carolina Congressman James Clyburn there. This weekend, Congressman Clyburn very publicly called on President Biden to endorse this idea, to endorse the idea of a carve-out for the filibuster for voting rights, so Democrats can get a bill on his desk to protect the right to vote. Congressman Clyburn said, quote, "I don't care whether he does it in a microphone or on the telephone. Just do it." Joining us now is James Clyburn, South Carolina Congressman, the majority whip in the House of Representatives. Congressman, it's a pleasure to see you. Thank you so much for making time to be with us tonight.
Thank you very much for having me, Rachel.
I know that you pick your fights carefully and that you don't jump into every fight willy-nilly, and you know your power with this administration and you know your power in Washington. Can you talk to us about the decision to make this public call on President Biden that he needs to endorse a change in this rule so voting rights can pass with just 50 votes?
Well, as you just mentioned, I said when I made my statement that you don't have to get in front of a microphone in order to do the kind of negotiations or to make the kind of endorsement that need to be made. You can do it on the telephone. And I do believe that this is the kind of issue that need to be going one-on-one with. And I'm pleased to hear the vice president, to whom the president has given this responsibility, is in fact having those discussions with members of the Senate. Because we all know that the filibuster is not in the Constitution. It's not a law. It's a tradition. And traditions means a past. In order for us to look to the future, we must begin to look at what is necessary for this great country to continue its movement towards perfection. That's what we're all about. Not a perfect country, but a country in search of perfection. And we need to do that by voting rights, be it H.R. 1 and H.R. 4, the John R. Lewis Voter Advancement Act.
Congressman Clyburn, I know that you are close with the president, and I know that you've said that you've spoken directly with Vice President Harris about this. I know you've also, over the course of this voting rights fight, spoken directly and done some work with Senator Joe Manchin, the centrist West Virginia senator who has been such a fulcrum on this point. The question of what he's willing to do and how he's willing to approach this has become potentially determinative in terms of whether or not the Democrats in the Senate are able to actually act. How open is the door that you are pushing on here? How much resistance is there to this idea? How strong are the arguments that are being made against the kind of reform that you're talking about?
Well, I have had extensive conversations with Joe Manchin. I like Joe Manchin. We've been friends for a long time. We used to do a lot of these kinds of shows together, just like I did with Joe Biden. So both of us have developed a great deal of patience with each other. And so I think that Joe has made me a little bit sensitive to the filibuster. I used to want to get rid of the whole thing. But he has convinced me that there's a place for extended debate on legislative issues. I am hopeful that I can convince him that we ought to treat constitutional issues the same way we treat budget issues. We move the budget forward without this filibuster application so as not to threaten the full faith and credit of the United States of America. And we ought to move forward on constitutional issues when it comes to the filibuster. So the filibuster, I think, has its place, but not when it comes to voting and other constitutional issues. So we'll see where we go from here. I am hopeful that Joe Manchin will do what I know that he's capable of doing, and that is the right thing.
Hearing you say that you are hopeful about that is going to change a lot of people's, I think, sense of despair on this issue. I think a lot of people very worried about democracy and very worried about voting rights have felt like that this is an impasse, that there's no way around. Hearing you talk about those conversations, hearing you express hope on this issue, hearing you be so specific in terms of what you'd like the president and vice president to do, it feels like a path. Thanks for helping us understand it tonight, Congressman. It's always an honor to have you here whenever you can be here.
Thank you very much for having me.